Florida State should be catching heat right now for the way they played on Saturday. And they're pretty much exactly who we thought they were going to be if you watch this show and want to win the water cooler. But I don't think there's been nearly enough praise heaped on everybody associated with the Georgia Tech football team, from the players to the coaches. Not only did Georgia Tech outplay FSU, but they outcoached them by a mile as well. Now, we can talk about the great plan that offensive coordinator Buster Faulkner put together with so much pre-snap eye candy and wide motions only to soften up the middle of that Florida State defense against the run, or about their DC, Tyler Santucci, deciding when it was a passing down and the money was on the line, I'm going to bring the heat on DJU to force a quick decision and a sped-up throw. But to me, I think something deeper won this game. I think culture won it for Georgia Tech. Now, the word culture has become so cliche now that I think sometimes we forget the examples of it right when it's in our face. We got a heavy dose of how together this Georgia Tech team actually is after all offseason, hearing how Florida State was going to run it down their throat, and the Seminoles did with ease on that first drive. But not only did Georgia Tech not bat an eye, they answered with a nice scoring drive of their own, and the defense clamped down in clutch situations for most of the game. A lot of teams would have folded after it seemed the rumors would ring true about the Florida State run game just pounding Georgia Tech. That takes balls, it takes guts, but most importantly, it takes leadership. When a team had to make a big-time play to extend a drive or get a stop in a key moment, it was Haynes King and it was the Georgia Tech team, not DJU and Florida State. Now, DJ wasn't terrible. He just wasn't good enough. But that's what happens, I guess, when you go against a king. So while there are many reasons for Rambling Wreck fans to be happy this week, the way this team is built and the mental fortitude and the culture that they have and have created should be near or at the top of the list. David Cohn, former Michigan quarterback, my brother, former Western State Colorado wide receiver Blaine Crane. And David, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of schematically what Georgia Tech did, what Florida State was not able to do. Mm-hmm. But I thought Georgia Tech answering the bell after that first drive, when a lot of people, you click on social media, had pretty much already quit on Georgia Tech. To me, that shows you what Brent Key is building and the type of individual that makes up the Georgia Tech team. Because that takes a little something extra that a team that doesn't believe in themselves and doesn't have that leadership, you can't pull that one out of your butt.
Well, first of all, what a fantastic football game to start the season. I mean, from start to finish, it was just an excellent game, and I was shocked by nothing in this game, right? I took the under at 55, largest lead of the game, under 18.5. Georgia Tech to cover in the first half. All of that hit, so I wasn't shocked by a single thing. What I was surprised with a little bit was Florida State's inability to run the ball as the game went on, especially in the second half. When you saw them when they were on script early and everything was on schedule, had it all working, what were they doing? They were running the ball effectively between the tackles. They had the speed sweeps working on the outside, and then a little bit of play action off of that, right? Go down, score right away, and get the 2-point conversion. And Georgia Tech answers right back. They're on script, they're on schedule. So none of that was surprising. But then as the game went on, their inability to really run the ball at will against Georgia Tech. And then on the flip side of that, Florida State's inability with that new defensive line to stop Georgia Tech's run game as the game went on. And it was basically just a heavy dose of counter. Yeah. How many different ways can we throw counter at you? I was a little bit surprised by that, but not too surprised. Georgia Tech led the ACC in rushing a year ago, top 12 nationally, just like you were talking about. Buster Faulkner combined with Brent Key as the head coach, who was a 4-year starter on the offensive line for Georgia Tech. That's what you're going to get. You're going to get countered. You're going to get these unbalanced formations. And DJ Uiagalelei, I know we're going to talk about his performance, but again, we weren't surprised. Maybe some Florida State fans were surprised. We were all watching the game with Clemson fans, and they said, hey, this is exactly what we watched for 3 years. And I thought that drive right before halftime, I told you guys, they got the football back with 3 minutes and 13 seconds left. I said, this drive right here is going to be an indication of how the Florida State coaching staff feels about their new quarterback right now. And they went, 33 yards, something like that, just to be able to get in field goal range to kick that 59-yarder, which you hit a very nice bet on.
I did.
But no sense of urgency with 3 minutes and 13 seconds and 3 timeouts to go down and say, you know what, let's go down and score before halftime.
And I do want to get into DJU in 1 second. The phone is going to open at 2:45 p.m. Central, 1-855-236-3228. We're going to get to the chat. I know a bunch of y'all are in there. Blaine, before we start talking about what Florida State couldn't do, I want to just, for one more second, hang on to what Georgia Tech did do. I think a lot of people, and this is why if you go back and watch our preview of this game, had forgotten, A, that Georgia Tech was so good running the ball last year, B, that Haynes King was a cherry on top of that ability to run the ball, and then again all offseason hearing about how much better Florida State was than them up front. I think I even stood up behind the chair here one time and said all the Georgia Tech front seven. And you can look at 44, the linebacker for Georgia Tech, right, had the neck
roll.
That guy ain't playing in the NFL.
Kyle Edford.
Yeah, he's not playing in the NFL. But that front seven for Georgia Tech, and Santucci, they stunted some. They slanted a little bit early. But once Florida State got off script, I thought the plays that were there to win the game, whether it be on offense, whether it be on defense, I thought both special teams units were pretty good. You know, you did have the one missed field goal. But outside of that, when I looked at Georgia Tech and their ability to be able to make the plays that they had to make, it was a collective group effort. But again, Florida State, I still think overall has better players than Georgia Tech.
100%. Even with after what they
But
lost.
what Georgia Tech did to the interior of that Florida State defense, and a lot of it was because of this. You were getting a lot of motion back and forth, not just when they were on script early, but throughout the game, they were motioning people. They would give the jet sweep. They would keep the jet sweep. They would motion with the back in the backfield with the slot guy, fake that, give it to him. They had Florida State's eyes going like this in the middle of that box. And Florida State, who didn't have their offensive coordinator, their play caller, who's serving a suspension, so Mike Norvell took over the play calling, didn't get nearly as creative because they didn't think they had to get creative. I thought the plan and the execution of the plan was absolutely perfect by Georgia Tech. They beat Florida State at the way Florida State wants to beat people. And to me, that shows a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it you can go to what Brent Keith said at the end of the game. In his post-game interview, is let's run the damn ball, right? That speaks to what? That speaks to culture. That speaks to your locker room. And the big thing with me is, you know, it seemed like Brent Key knew who his quarterback was and he trusted his quarterback. When it came down to it and everything broke down, what did Haynes King do? And did it a lot last year. There's two stats you can look at this game and know how it ended up. One, Georgia Tech averaged 5.5 yards per carry.
That's insane.
5.5 yards per carry. And apparently this Florida State defensive line was supposed to be one of the best in the nation. Wrong. And two, what did Haynes King do a lot last year? Turn the ball over. Do a lot of interceptions. How many do you have in the Florida State game? 0. And you established this what? Up front, misdirection. I thought Florida State stayed in way too much man.
Yeah.
It seemed like they ran covered two man the entire game and in big situations. Yeah. 3rd and 12, 3rd and 10 plus. If you're going to run man, at least don't give up the inside.
Yeah, well, I understand running man in 3rd and 12. Where I kind of started to lose me a little bit, and I was questioning what they were doing defensively in the second half, was the 3rd and 4s and the 3rd and 3s. And there's no problem running man. There's no problem running split coverages or bringing blitzes and having help behind at fire zones or whatever. But the thing about man coverage is if you don't win in that box, it can hurt you really bad really quickly because DB's backs are turned, right? And when you're running 2-man on 3rd and 12, that's different than doing it on 3rd and 4 because now if you're sitting there running cover 2, hey, maybe that corner in the flat could come up and help and set the edge of that line of scrimmage. Instead, his ass has got his back turned because he's having to follow the wide receiver. Even if it's a slant, even if he's opening up inside the line of scrimmage, he can't get off his guy to go tackle the running back because what if it's some sort of halfback pass and his guy is the one catching the ball? So, you know, zone helps you out a little bit against the run from a defensive back standpoint. But getting back to Florida State, and this is the thing, I went on the Renegade Report, went on with Jen Knoll and all of them, and it was funny. I was going on a Florida State show talking about how I thought Miami was going to win the ACC and that Georgia Tech had a chance. It's that Florida State has no plan B with DJU. Why? Because there is no plan B with DJU. And that's not saying DJU is a bad player. No. Nobody's accusing him of being a bad player, and he did some good things. But he's not going to be able to make the plays and consistently make the throws to get you out of something on defense or to give you confidence offensively. If somebody shows you who they are enough, you've got to believe them. And DJU's been in college for 30 years. This is why we were saying, if Florida State's not able to run the ball at will, like they did on that first drive, and they get caught in 3rd and 6 and 3rd and 7, what's the answer? Well, Santucci said, you know what? I'm going to dial your ass up, and I'm going to bring pressure every single time, and it does two things. One, it totally negates DJU's ability to wiggle out and go run after because he's not that elusive. And two, it makes him get rid of the ball quicker. And even though he knows to throw into the blitzer, he still struggles to make the routine throws routine. On that I can't remember if it was the first drive or the second drive, he had a guy wide open on a slant inside on 3rd down and almost threw it so far behind him. The guy had to make a great catch to get the first down. Douglas had to make some incredible catches to be able to make plays and extend drives. There is no plan B with DJU. It's plan A. If plan doesn't work, let's try plan A. If neither plan A or plan works, hell, let's try plan A again. And plan A didn't work.
And you know, the thing though is, and we've been talking about this for a couple years now, is the inaccuracy with the ball at times, or holding on to the ball a lot of times. You don't get that all the time, because when he needed to make some big throws in the fourth quarter, he made them. And so you always have these moments in every game.
You can look back and say, see?
That's how it's supposed to look, because he did throw some great balls. You're talking about the run game. Like, for them to be a playoff team with him at quarterback, we've been saying, like, they have to be as good as Michigan was last year.
That's exactly right.
Or Georgia a couple years
And that's why none of us had them in the playoff.
We didn't see that. None of us had them in the playoff. But also, I was telling you guys, I really want to see, what does it look like with the absence of Keon Coleman, you know, and Johnny Wilson and some of these guys on the outside? Because last year we were watching Keon Coleman catch those slant passes you're talking about and go for 65 against LSU.
Or Johnny Wilson here. And look, Malik Benson's a big bodied
I get it. But there were moments where we looked at each other in the game and said, oh, that's a moment right there. We're having two guys on either side. You know, you missed that for Florida State this year.
I don't think Florida State receivers, they're not Keon Coleman or Johnny Wilson, but they're pretty damn good.
Sure.
I think a huge difference, and not a lot of people talking about how good Jordan Travis was last year. How many pickles he got Mike Norvell out of last year, not from only a running standpoint, but he became a better thrower throughout his career.
Well, look at the ability to, if a play breaks down or something to happen with Jordan Travis. Plan A is the play. Plan B is Jordan Travis just takes off. Plan C, Jordan Travis takes off, keeps his eyes downfield, it turns into a scramble drill. How many times do we see Johnny Wilson streaking across the field last year when Jordan Travis broke contain? How many times do we see Keon Coleman when it turned into the scramble drill and the DB's got to make it go man to man, just beat a guy to the outside and Jordan Travis throw it, or the defense say, oh God, here comes Jaheim Bell and Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson on the scramble drill, and then Jordan Travis takes off.
And now if you're Florida State, I'm even more worried. As Georgia Tech's a good football team, but they're not great. Well, against the big dogs against the big dogs in the ACC, that Miami's going to look a little different.
Well, I would be more worried if I was a Florida State fan. The offense is going to be what the offense is. Like, that's just it with DJU. There's a ceiling that you have. There'll be some games he throws better and you can get away with just the intermediate to short throws and just hitting the decoy ones over the top, even if you don't complete them, to scare the other team. But defensively, you're now playing a Boston College team with another quarterback that can really run in Castellanos that's going to try and do this, and they're not horrific up front. They got a tight end that's a hell of a player that transferred from North Carolina. So I'm looking at that Florida State-BC spread a little bit different. Florida State should still win, but I'm more worried about the interior of that defensive line, because if I'm Boston College and I don't know, Bill O'Brien, the head coach, you're going to see a lot of this, buddy. There's going to be a lot of this. There's going to be a lot of this back in the line of scrimmage. It's going to be it's going to be like watching an M. Night Shyamalan movie. You don't know which way this
I think you'll see a lot less slanting up front and man coverage from Florida State this week coming up.
I think you'll see that. I think you'll see a lot more cover, too, to be honest with you. All right, let's get to the...
All right, Chad, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. If you donate, it's on topic. It will get read. Let's get that feet chopping today. Boys football is back. We're going to start off with Stephen Rackley. What's up, Stephen? Says, fellas, this is tough to listen to. We're heading back to old FSU, I feel like. Guess I'm just hoping for 500 this year.
Well, here's what I'll say to Florida State fans. It's not time to jump off the cliff. Mike Norvell is not a bad coach. You lost so much to the NFL draft last year on both sides of the ball. Trying to replace that was going to be tough. It's just DJU isn't who a lot of people try to keep pretending DJU is. And again, it's not just his fault. All right? There's a lot more people. DJU played fine, but fine doesn't win national championships. Fine doesn't win ACC championships. Hell, fine doesn't even win Conference USA championships. You guys had elite last year. You had some fantastically talented players. You lost those guys and tried to replace them. To me, I think it makes it even more impressive what Mike Norvell was able to do last year, getting all those guys out of the transfer portal to come together and play well. You tried it again, and it didn't work as good. Yeah. A lot of it because the pieces aren't as good because they just weren't going to be. Yeah. Cam Ward was the guy to get out of the portal.
And they tried to get him.
And you tried to get him, and he went to Miami.
Yeah, I think this says more about Georgia Tech than it does about Florida State, this win. And unless you were somebody who said, well, no, Florida State's going to win the ACC and they're going to be, the number 3 team overall and get the first round bye. If you thought that, maybe it says more about Florida State. I think Florida State's still going to beat a bunch of people this season. I just think this really shows us what Georgia Tech's going to be under Brink.
And that's why, again, I want to make sure. And I had Georgia Tech. I've got Georgia Tech going 6-6, 7-5, something like that, and they still might. But Florida State 9-3 is feeling about right. 9-3, 8-4 area feels about right.
One last point, and you just touched on it with how Georgia Tech may go 7-5. Their schedule's so tough, one of the top 5 toughest schedules. This loss may look like a very bad loss for Florida State at the end of the year, but it shouldn't if you opened your eyes and said, hey, this is a good football team. Georgia Tech may just suffer 4 or 5 losses because the schedule's so tough.
You had a team that knew who they were, that had played together before against a team that was talented, had an idea of who they were, and then when they found out maybe we really aren't that, there was no answer for it, and that's tough.
I was going to Carla Jenkins. What's up, caller? Is it just me? The FSU O-line and D-line were very preseason hyped and turned out to be average. What was with all the preseason hype, and was that just coming out of their camp?
No, I mean, a lot of people, and look, again, I don't think Florida State's bad up front on either side of the ball. I think 2 things happened. One, the offense came out there, was on script, it worked perfectly, probably got to the sideline and was like, boys, we're about to rack this one up. They are exactly who we thought they were. And then they kind of relaxed a little bit. But that's why, again, I go back to Georgia Tech answering so quick. Sometimes it's not just that you answer, it's how you answer. Georgia Tech got the ball, marched it right down the field. Don't forget, Florida State hit a 2-point conversion. Because Georgia Tech wasn't like, it couldn't have started any worse for Georgia Tech. But that's when those dog days of the summer come back. That's when those winter workouts come back. That's when going through the spring practice and the fall camps and the two-a-days and all the summer conditioning and lifting the weights and doing all that stuff. When you form an identity as a team, you don't panic. I feel like Georgia Tech stayed the course and they know who they were.
Let's go to Doc Snicklefritz. Everyone just avoiding the obvious. A QB's first year in a system is a QB's first year in a system. The portal didn't get magically easier to adjust from. QBs just can't be placed on a team and expect a ball week 1.
You know, you say that, but look at DJ Uiagalelei's stats at Oregon State and at Clemson the year before. They're almost identical, and that was him in a.
It's because we know who he is. Like 90% of the time, you'd be right. But DJU's played college football for 30 years. Hell, he's seen more systems than I have with Xbox and PlayStation growing up. It's like the excuses are done for DJ. I'm tired of the excuses. They're done. He's been to 3 schools. He is who he is. He is who we were telling you he was. Now, if this was some freshman that transferred to some new place, yes. Even like Peyton Thorne's a great example of that, right? Going from Michigan State to Auburn last year. Yeah, he didn't have a lot of great pieces, but he went from a pro-style drop-back system to an RPO zone scheme system. Yes, it takes some time. This system wasn't that much different than what DJU was doing at Oregon State. Hell, it's probably a lot more like it than what
They're
he was
not running
doing
the
at Clemson.
triple option or anything.
Yeah, like that's just not true. If you want to make excuses for DJU, right, then just donate to his NIL fund and tell him how damn good he is. But we're just going to keep telling you the truth.
And people don't realize how good that Oregon State offense was.
Oh, they were good.
That Oregon State offensive line was incredible.
Oh, God.
Here's Clemson 2022. DJ threw for 2,500 yards, 22 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. 2023 for Oregon State, 2,600 yards, 21 touchdowns, 7 interceptions.
Yeah, we know who he is. And again, he's not a bad player. DJU's just not a great player, right? We know who he is. Hey, YouTube, what's up? We are almost to 150,000 subs. We want to get there before kickoff this weekend. So if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate it.